So again, we're waiting for the announcement after the bell at the White House. But I want to ask you, you've said publicly on other outlets that this time around, the Trump administration is just more like-minded when it comes to tariffs. So why are we hearing all these conflicting reports about what they're going to be, what the president's thinking is, and how it's going to be rolled out?
Well, Frank, I think that in the aftermath of the election, markets rallied before Inauguration Day because they expected much of the same economic policy of the first administration of low taxes, deregulatory agenda, and believed that in many cases the tariffs were simply for negotiation. I think that the advisors he has around him in the second administration are far more committed acolytes and disciples of believing in strong tariffs and believing that the protectionist trade policies will bring jobs back to America. I think the reality is that much of what the incentive for the tax relief of 2017 was to bring jobs back, that you lower the corporate tax rate and jobs will come back. And I think, you know, your next guest will be able to explain that better, that agenda actually worked in bringing the jobs back. But these tariffs, I think you're seeing in consumer sentiment, you're seeing in new forecasts for GDP, you're seeing in potential threats of a recession, that the expectation is that this is actually not going to be a productive pathway, and I think actually could undermine other parts of the president's agenda.
So, Mark, we've heard the president say he's not so concerned about the markets or seemingly about the short-term pain, at least when it comes to the economy. Is that something that you believe? And what happens if he doesn't quite get the response he's expecting from these tariffs?
I think the president is sensitive to markets. I think it was a source of pride as to how well the economy did in his first administration, how well markets did. So I do think he's reactive to it. Having said that, Frank, I think that there's still an underappreciation for the breadth and scope of what I think will be announced today. The president launched 22 separate investigations in his first couple days in executive orders on trade that essentially, when the Department of Commerce comes back after 90 days of investigation, will give the president enormous authority that I think we haven't seen as far as the scope of something like this in 100 years, as far as the level of tariffs. And in some cases, Frank, they may be immediate. In some cases, he may hold some back in his back pocket for negotiation purposes. But there's no doubt that from the investigations, some of them were on trade deficits, some were on unfair trade practices, some were alleging currency manipulation. That when the Department of Commerce comes forward and confirms that all these things the president alleges are true, then he's going to feel like he has enormous authority to exert tariffs across the broad scope of the economy.
You know, so, Mark, you just mentioned negotiation. I've heard some other reports where administration officials are mentioning negotiation, but I want to bounce something off of you. The ECB's Christine Lagarde coming out and saying there's a lot less excitement about investing in the U.S., saying at the moment there's a stop and hold until there's more certainty. Does negotiation, does it come after capitulation? Do you need to see, does the president or the administration need to see other countries capitulate and other trading blocs capitulate? Or can they negotiate from this point? Because it sounds like the ECB and Lagarde are kind of holding their heels and digging them in the stand.
I think that the president loves to negotiate, but I think you're exactly right. The reality is the uncertainty has certainly been a hangover on the economy right now, and I think that there's going to be a continued uncertainty. And probably, I think that that probably comes after capitulation. It'll never be framed that way. I think the president will declare some sort of victory down the road when he negotiates. But I think that you're right. It'll probably be after suffering, and there's a point of capitulation that says, okay, now we need to negotiate different terms.
Mark, just very quick before we let you go, do you think this is going to work? Do you think it's going to work to bring more jobs back to the U.S., more manufacturing to the U.S., and production to the U.S.?
I think we've learned this lesson painfully in the past that no, tariffs do not work. I think that, you know, Democrats have tried to have planned economies in many cases, whether or not it's the Biden administration telling you what kind of vehicles you purchase. It's a similar vein of thought that basically says we're going to plan the economy and tell Americans what they can purchase and how they can purchase it, and they can't purchase foreign goods. And I think the reality is that this rarely works when government officials try to control the economy. And so, no, I do not have much anticipation that this will work. I think the president's deregulatory and pro-growth tax agenda is great for the economy. I think the trade agenda is an enormous wet blanket over the positive things that he's doing otherwise.